Welcome to Creative Catalyst. It's me, Chris, as always. I'm here with my friend Rosie here from Daze, Jewellery.
Hello.
But we're going to be starting our episode soon. But I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming back. It's been over a year since I've recorded a podcast and over 2.5 years since I've done one in person. So I can see you in 3D, which is very exciting, Rosie.
Very exciting.
But I just wanted to thank everyone for coming back. And we're going to be launching these every single month at the first day of each month. So if it gets to the first day of the month, you'll know there's another episode of Creative Catalyst. I think we're going to jump into it. So Rosie, as my first guest for episode 51, but our first in person again, what quote have you brought with you today and what does it mean?
I'm perpetually bad at remembering quotes. I'm one of those people that will try and say a quote but completely butcher it and say it in about 3 sentences rather than one.
Oh, really?
But my favourite quote is, "The day you plant the seed is not the day you eat the fruit." And this is something that I often tell myself because I have found in the years that I've had a business, quite often you'll be putting a lot of effort in, whether it's like just one day, a month, or for quite a few months. And you don't always feel like you're getting back what you put in, especially at the beginning. And I think it's so important to have that belief that you will get it back at some point. You have to put that effort in at certain points and it will come back to you, and you sort of just have to have the patience to carry on.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm excited to see how that threads into everything we talk about today. So we're going to be talking about like the business, your growth as a creative from the beginning, and then like what advice you would have for others as well. So I can't wait to get going.
Yeah.
At the start of the pandemic, you had this jewelry business, or was this like birthed out of the pandemic and then you've gone into a point of being full-time with it?
So I started my brand back in 2017.
Oh, okay. So you're a seasoned pro.
It's yeah. I think, what does that make it? We're in 2022. So 5 years.
Damn.
It's been 5 years. And it was called Mood Good until about a month or 2 months ago, until I renamed as Daze.
Nice.
And yeah, it's been quite a long journey so far. I've been doing it alongside full-time employment and then 4-day-a-week employment. And it was only actually at the end of last year that I went full-time.
Interesting. Because I think what I'm excited to dive into today is kind of that whole journey of going from doing something completely different to this and doing it alongside, like juggling those two businesses together.
Yeah.
And then like the dream, which is to go to like 4 days a week with your work, and then 3 days. And then if you have the ability to do 2 days, and then like doing the leap.
Doing the thing.
Like, did you go from 4 days to full time?
Yes. So
Ooh, that is a leap.
It was a lot. Doing 4 days a week of a job and my business, which, last year it was a struggle because my business it had grown a lot over lockdown. So it was basically a full-time job in itself.
Right.
And then trying to fit that around basically a full-time job, because 4 days a week is not really that different to 5 days a week.
No.
It was really intense. I actually did want to go down to less days, but it just sort of didn't really work out. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to sort of power through and just work really, really hard and hopefully like get to that point quicker that I can just go full time with it. So yeah, I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. Like there was a lot of late nights and a lot of kind of missing out on social plans and sacrifices and things like that. But I mean, luckily the real crunch time was over lockdown. So to be honest, there weren't few social plans anyway.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to
miss
I didn't have to miss out on too much. But yeah, it was full on.
Right.
I will say that, doing both, trying to juggle it all. I constantly felt like I was going to slip up and like miss something really important, which luckily I managed not to do. But I was running on empty basically by the time that I fully went full time.
How do you go from a job where you have like, I guess, a clock in and clock out to trying to self-regulate how much time you spend doing the thing that you love, which is your business, and then actually going, I need, because I know we talked about it a bit, but I need some social time. I need to disconnect from this thing that I've worked so hard to build?
Yeah, the answer is not well. I would say I'm probably like a bit of a workaholic, because I just get such a buzz from working hard, and like, that sounds so geeky.
No, it doesn't. No,
but it's true. And when I first went full time, I was like, right, I'm going to be that person who, you know, gets up at 8:30 and like has my lovely healthy breakfast and does my stretches and then gets to work at 9. That's just not me, and it never will be. Like I'm a night owl. I work really well in the evenings, and I just can't. I'm not a very routine person. I don't enjoy routine, and I don't find it inspiring. So I basically just work quite intuitively. Like when I feel inspired and motivated, I'll work extremely intensely, which I'm not recommending this. This is not the healthiest way to do it, I don't think, but this is just how I am, and I've accepted that that's just how I am. I'll go through periods of time where I work extremely intensely, and I'll basically just work for like hours and hours. And then I'll have a couple of days where I'll barely do anything. And that kind of just works for me. And I think at times I felt like really guilty about, not guilty, but like that's some sort of failing that I don't work really regimented, but I've kind of just accepted that that's just who I am. And I don't think it's ever going to change.
Yeah, and maybe part of the reason why you've been drawn to running your own business is because that is who you are, rather than having to be that prescribed structure that is given to you. Like, you like to flow with how you're feeling. Definitely,
like absolutely. And I am very self-motivated. So when I'm in those periods of time where I'm working really hard, like I don't find it a chore. Like I love it, and I just get really into something, and then I'm just obsessed with it, and I just want to do it every waking moment. And then there are other days when I'm like, I can't be arsed today. Like I just don't, I just want to do nothing and watch TV, or like go and see my friends or do whatever. And I think the beauty of doing it full time is that I can follow my feelings with it, and I can, on the days when I don't want to do as much, I can not do as much. And then on the days when I want to work until 3 a.m. and then I can, and no one's going to stop me. So yeah, it sort of works really.
Yeah.
It sounds really unhealthy, and I think at times it is probably, but it's not like that all the time. Like I'm not working till 3 a.m. all the time, but when I was juggling both jobs, that was a lot more frequent, and I am glad that I'm over with, like I've done with that, because it's not a good way to live really when it's all the time. But every now and then I think it's quite exciting really, like working.
To dabble.
Yeah. Do you work late? Is that...
It's interesting. I've always felt like I was a morning person.
Okay.
And I'm always like up and chatty with people in the morning. But I do find that my most productive times for creativity are late in the evenings.
Yeah.
And I might be up until like, I would say that my late nights are like midnight. And
okay. Most people's are. I think I'm an anomaly in that
3
sense.
3 a.m. Whew. That's a tough one.
I know. Don't let my mum know. She'll be like, Rosie, it's just ridiculous. But I love that, because a lot of people say this about the morning, where everything's quiet and you're not getting any emails, no one's bothering you. Not bothering you, that sounds really horrible, but like you're not getting any WhatsApps, you know what I mean? It's just quiet, and you can just kind of have that time to, your head's really clear to just focus on what you want to focus on and not be disturbed. And I just thrive in that environment where I can just put my head down and just like crack on.
Yeah.
So, but you probably feel that about the mornings.
Yeah, but I think it is interesting because like my dad, he's a project manager, and he'll go into work and he'll have constant emails throughout the day. So he's always communicating, and sometimes not being able to do actually the nitty gritty of what he needs to do. And so I find it interesting that, the beauty of from midnight to 3 a.m. is that that everyone else is asleep. So you can just get on with exactly what you need to do, which I find, very interesting.
Yeah.
Let's bring it back. So as a kid, was like creativity, was jewellery something you were interested in, or was it just creativity in general? And did you also stay up till 3 a.m? Is this more like an adult thing?
I would have if I could have, but I definitely wasn't allowed to, unfortunately. So I've definitely always been creative, 100%. I've always been making. I've always been kind of, just since I was a child, I'd sort of make everyone's birthday cards and Christmas cards, and I was always like spending all my birthday money at like Hobbycraft and you know, just always making, always loved art. And it was only recently actually that I sort of put together the jewellery connection, because when I was young, my grandma was really, really glamorous, and she had like a massive jewellery collection, and she was Scottish, but her husband, my granddad, who died before I was born, he was Indian, and he used to go and work in India for periods of time, and he would bring her back a bit of jewellery every time he went to India. And so she had this like incredible jewellery collection, and every time I would go to her house, I would get out all her jewellery and I'd try it on, and I'd just be fascinated by it. I'd absolutely love it. And it was only recently, because she died a few months ago, it was only recently that I sort of put it all together, and I was like, actually, those are some of my fondest memories of being around her. Like, we would sort of do this together and look at all her jewellery, and each piece would have like a story. And like Indian jewellery is very like yellow gold, which I love. Like, I love that yellow gold.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that was where my love of jewellery began. And it wasn't something that I even realised until like earlier this year. And then I put it all together and I was like, oh yeah, wow.
That's it. It
all
came
makes
full
sense.
Circle.
Exactly.
That's interesting. And did you find that like during education, were you drawn to the tangible, like the things where you would get hands-on with stuff like woodworking or the textiles or all the craft stuff, or were you actually quite interested in all the other stuff as well?
Well, so I wouldn't say I'm like a maker. Like, I love the creative side of things in terms of the thought process, but when it actually comes to making things, I'm actually really like impatient.
Oh, really?
And I just I don't have the patience for kind of technical making things. And that was, I mean, I studied jewelry design at uni, and that was always a bit of a hindrance, because I was like, I've got all the ideas, but I don't really want to have to make it. And obviously you kind of have to when you're at uni. But yeah, at school I was very much like, I kind of enjoyed a bit of everything. I was quite academic as well as being creative, and I really kept my options open until the last minute. Like, I did A-levels in maths and English and psychology as well as art, because I didn't want to sort of, you know, cut any options off too soon. But I always knew that I would end up having a creative career, because I couldn't imagine myself being happy doing anything else. But I wouldn't say I'm like super hands-on. Right. I'm very much like, I have an idea and I love it, and then I'm like on to the next thing. Yeah. And it's gone, and I'm not interested anymore. Like, once I've had the idea and I've sat with it, I want to move on. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. I get that. And is that something where, because I'm curious so you went to uni to study jewelry design.
Yeah.
But you had your options open for other things.
Mm-hmm.
What was the turning point to decide that actually going to uni to study jewelry design rather than going down the other route? Like, was that a difficult decision, or was that an easy decision to do?
I would say it was an easy decision. I studied a foundation year, so I got to sort of try out all of the creative avenues. And it was only in that year that I sort of settled on jewelry. Right. So I didn't go from school straight into jewelry design. And that foundation year was a really good kind of bridge, really, to figure out what I wanted to do, because at school, my art department was very much like, painting is art, and that's pretty much where art ends. Or like, you know, at a push, like sculpting, using clay. But it was very traditional, you know. It was very much like, you paint, you draw, that's it. If you're an artist, you're like making art for the sake of art. Like, that was kind of the kind of that was sort of how it was. And I always kind of I wasn't very good at painting. It didn't feel that natural to me. I still enjoyed it, but I didn't feel like that was really where I was meant to be. And I didn't know what I was meant to do. I just knew that it was something creative. Yeah. And then it was when I went to the foundation year, and it was actually the first week that I tried jewelry, and I was like, that's me.
No way.
But I still tried everything else, and I actually really did enjoy graphics as well. But my tutor told me that my sketchbook was too messy. He was like, you can't be a graphic designer, your sketchbook's too messy. And I was like, okay, I guess that's the decision made then.
Well, I guess it's jewellery then. It's,
exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So it was just like a kind of a snap, like, oh, this, I really enjoy this.
Yeah, it made a lot of sense, because there's just something about, I think that is the fact that jewellery is worn. And I didn't like the idea of creating something that was static, like that was just in a gallery and no one got to enjoy it. Whereas I feel like with, obviously people do enjoy things in galleries, but like the fact that jewelry is so personal, and it's, so there's so much meaning tied up in it, and it's something that you wear, every day or at certain occasions. And I just feel like it has so much meaning, and it's so special. Yeah. And there's something really magical about that, I think. And the fact that it's also so long lasting, metal lasts forever, and there's just something really cool about that. And I think as soon as I thought about the concept of designing jewelry, it was almost like, is that actually something I'm allowed to do as a job? Because that seems like too cool to be true, And like, I always felt quite interested in fashion, but it's a very cutthroat industry. Like, it is very, it's just got a different vibe, and I just feel like I'm too much of a pushover, I think, for the fashion industry. Whereas everyone in the jewelry industry I feel like it's more laid back, and it's just, I just felt like it felt like the right thing.
Yeah, and it fits with you.
It just felt like it ticked all the boxes. And once I sort of tried it more and more, I was like, yeah, this is great. That's what I want to do. Yeah. And
going through uni and like gaining those skills, coming out of uni, was it an instant, okay, I'm going to go into work for a jewelry designer, or did you always have that you wanted to do your own brand? And what steps did you actually take when leaving uni? Did you, because I know you worked full time somewhere else, was that in the jewelry world or outside of it?
Yeah, so when I was at uni, I had this really strong feeling that I wanted to create jewelry that like myself and my friends could wear. Like, I didn't want to create, $1,000 million dollar jewelry dollar? I don't know why I said dollar. Not American.
Thinking about all markets here, Rosie, I understand. Yeah.
I didn't want to create really expensive jewelry that would be kind of kept in a cabinet and, just not worn. Like, I wanted to create things that people could actually wear and enjoy. And so when I left uni, my goal was to work for Topshop, because that was like my favorite shop at the time. And I did work experience there. It was actually the company that designed the jewelry for Topshop wasn't Topshop. It was like a concession. So right. I did work experience there, and I managed to get a job as a design assistant. And I ended up working there for like 4 or 5 years, and I absolutely loved it. Like, it was so fast paced and just really exciting, because it was my first job, and yet my jewelry that I was designing was in Topshop. I was like, that is just so cool. And it was really cool. And at the time, it was exactly what I wanted. But I think as it went on, I just really craved, I really craved creating something that was just a bit more thoughtful, and that there was a bit more of a kind of considered design process and considered making process. And it was a really quick turnaround. Like, you would be designing just, constantly.
Like, what's the next one? Or what's the next one? What's the next one?
Yeah. Which was really fun for a few years. But I think after a while, I was like, you know what? I actually just want to create things that are more timeless and that are more considered and that are more ethically made, more sustainably made. Like, that was a big factor as well. Obviously, in high street brands, everything's being mass produced. And I think as time went on, I started to feel more, I guess, like, kind of guilty about that. And I mean, I'm not putting anyone down. Like, you've got to do what you've got to do to pay the bills. And at that time in my life, it was like the perfect job. But I think I started to crave something that was just my own and that was more thoughtful and timeless and considered. And so I started my brand when I was still working there. And then, I ended up moving to another company that was similar kind of realm. Like, we were designing jewelry that was sold like on ASOS and Urban Outfitters. It was men's jewelry. And that really suited me because it was men's. It felt like there was a bit more of a, there was a less of a conflict of interest, which kind of was a bit of a sore point at the previous company. And I also was working remotely, like from the off, even before the pandemic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So that was great as well, because it just sort of allowed me a bit more flexibility. And also, you save on the commute time and all of that kind of stuff. So I've been working, which I'm incredibly lucky that I've been working as a jewelry designer since I left uni. So I've always been creatively kind of, fulfilled in that way. But I think it was that autonomy over having my own thing that I really craved.
Do you think that there was something there when it came to, I guess, flexing that muscle constantly about looking at trends and looking at like what was next and getting it out as quick as possible from when you see it kind of blowing up to when you need to have it in store? What was it like transitioning from a mentality like that into building your own business? Was it something you felt was easy, or did you still find yourself catching yourself out going like, oh no, let's slow down a little bit, let's just reassess?
That's a really interesting question, actually. I think I will always have a piece of me that is always trying to think of what the next thing is. And I almost produce too many designs. Like, I think I have so many products and more than I need to. And sometimes I feel like I'm shooting myself in the foot because I'm like, I've really made my life hard because
there's a lot going on.
I just have so many pieces. But it's because I get so much fulfillment out of creating. And I think, working in that environment, it really does satisfy that urge because you're constantly creating. And I think I'll always have that, that element that just has to be constantly making new things, even when I know that I shouldn't. And I think in terms of like always trying to chase trends and stuff like that, I think it's almost like I'm trying to chase something different. Like I'm always trying to create things that are new and that I haven't seen before, but that still feel timeless. So it's kind of like the brief's changed, but the drive to find that next thing is still there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's interesting that you talk about timeless because I'm wearing some of your jewelry right now.
Thank you.
The Good Daze, formerly known as Mood Good.
Yeah.
And I definitely find that like I've always been interested in jewelry, but I've never found anything apart from my watch I own that I've absolutely loved within jewelry. And it was as soon as this came out, because it was with Shirtup. Am I saying that right?
I'm not too sure. I think so. I'm not quite sure how to say it.
But it was with this collaboration was the first time I saw some jewelry where I was like, wow, like that is 100% me. And everything I wanted from it being like minimal, but then still super interesting. And you could tell a story around it. And I had all these moments where I tried on jewelry and it was never what I wanted. And then I found your stuff and I was like, this is something I can see wearing for multiple years, not just it's hot this season, but next season it will be like, why are you wearing that?
Yeah.
And also,
that's
like
the biggest
you said,
compliment ever. Thank you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
sweet.
basically everything I strive for. So thank you in
Nice.
a nutshell.
But also for the quality and the time you put into it, I find that the amount of money it cost me to buy it, it was like, this is definitely an investment into something I'm going to wear multiple times. But also, like you said, it's not so far away that I would never actually be able to justify getting it either.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of, so the price point is, I would say, like, for my customer, just the average person is on the higher end, but it's almost like I don't want people to buy my jewelry and not wear it. Like, I want them to like love it and wear it forever. So it's almost like, and also, I mean, to be honest, it's all made in London. It's ethically made. It's like, it's damn expensive. And I always get people who are outside of the industry. I always get cab drivers. When I tell them what I do, they're always like, have you thought about manufacturing in China? You know, you would make so much more profit. And I'm like, yeah, like obviously I've thought of that. It's a very much a conscious decision. But yeah, that is really, really kind. And that is exactly, I want people to wear it for a really, really long time. And I want them to enjoy wearing it for years and years. And when I see people wearing a piece that I know that they've bought like years before, I just get such a buzz, because I'm like, that is, for me, that's what it's all about. Like being able to love it and wear it for like forever, hopefully. Yeah.
I definitely like, I don't know if this sounds too clinical, but for a lot of the stuff I purchase, I always think of like cost per wear. So yeah, it might be expensive, but how many times are you going to wear that versus if you get something a lot cheaper, but actually you're not as invested in it, and then you don't wear it that much. And I find that for like my clothing and for now my jewelry and my watch, like I've worn it so much that actually it's like a penny every time I've actually put that top on or this jewelry on. And
exactly. So, that's so true. And I think as well with jewelry, one of the things I love about it is it can hold so much meaning. So like so many of my customers will buy a piece when, you know, they've got a new job or they've graduated, or, you know, as an anniversary with their partner or with their best friend, you know, they'll have matching pieces, or there's so much meaning in it. And it's like, it's almost like when something has that much sentiment, it kind of, to you, it becomes like invaluable. Do you know what I mean? So I love it when people buy stuff to celebrate milestones, because I just think every time they look at that piece, they'll feel like that sense of pride or that joy, or that love or whatever. And that is just so cool. And I feel like you don't necessarily get that with clothes as much. Yeah. But with jewelry, it's just so like there's something so special about it.
And I guess that you can wear it every single day.
Absolutely, with any outfit. It goes with everything.
Whereas if I start wearing the same top every single day, people at some point will...
Eventually. You'll be like a cartoon character.
That's it, yeah. I'm just like Bart Simpson, just like that red top every single day. And that's my life.
Exactly.
I found that once with a top I bought and I loved it. So I bought a second version of this. This is when I was like 13 years old. So I was just like, I love this Star Wars top. So I got two of them. But then I realized I can't wear these, even though they're totally fresh tops, I can't wear these 2 or 3 days in a row, because people be like, why are you coming in this same top? And it's like, no, you don't understand.
It's not the same top.
Yeah. Something I want to dive into a little bit with you, because I find it fascinating as a concept, is you going from working full-time in an environment with other jewelry designers to then going remote with that. So you're still working with people, but you are doing it remotely in your own home, to now running your own business, but you are kind of the one and all. You are the person you're around every single day. How have you found that with your relationship with yourself, but also with the relationship with your environment? Because I know that you work from your own home.
Yeah, so I would say that it has made me learn so much about how I work and who I am, and basically just everything, because I think when you cut out all the noise of, you know, you have to work from this time to this time and you have to be in this meeting and you have to be doing this at this time, you kind of become really aware of your own habits and patterns. And I think it's just so refreshing to be able to kind of tune into the way that I work best, and kind of just like take the benefits from that and try and make the most out of that. So I'm, you know, definitely an introvert. I don't mind my own kind of being on my own for periods of time. Like I really don't have an issue with it. But I have noticed that like going out and seeing people and things like that, I do have to sort of sprinkle that throughout my week. Otherwise I do start to kind of feel like I'm in a bit of a box, like mentally as well as physically, because I do work from home. And yeah, it's really made me appreciate spending time with other creatives. And when I am in those situations, I really try and absorb as much of that as possible, because I do really miss working around other people and other creatives. Not every day, like sometimes it's really nice to just be able to like crack on and not have any meetings and things like that. But generally, I loved working in a team and bouncing ideas off other people. But I think also that's what's really driven me to do quite a lot of collaborations, because that kind of is like the best of both worlds, really.
And with collaborations, like how has that come about, and how did the first one come about? And then how has that collaboration kind of grown throughout the different ones you've done? Has it changed, or has it always kind of been the same the way you've done it?
So I think all of the collaborations that I've done have honestly come around like so naturally. And I think like I've always tried to connect with people that inspire me. And if I think someone is doing something really cool, I always try as much as I can to like tell them and to talk to them and to get to know them. And I think quite naturally out of those situations, these things can sort of just happen. And with every collaboration that I've done, it's been a case of, that creative has been on my radar for like a period of time.
Yeah.
And I've genuinely just thought like their work is so cool. And at some point I've had an idea of like, oh, imagine if, that drawing of theirs was on like this kind of piece, or, got really kind of excited about a concept. And then I've approached them with the idea and said like, I've had this, really exciting idea. And and then it's kind of just born out of that. And I think, those things can come about quite naturally if you just surround yourself with people that you find inspiring. And I think that's a much better way of going about it than just approaching someone like cold and just being like, hi, you've never heard of me, but I really like your work. Let's do something together.
Yeah.
I've just found that, it's just the best way to do it, to kind of just get to know people because you want to get to know them and you like their work. And then if a collaboration comes out of that, it's like a bonus, really.
Yeah. How has curiosity played a factor in your creativity?
Ooh, that's a good question. Curiosity. I think, like I said before, I think I'm always trying to, like, I always really want to create something that I feel like is a bit different to what I've seen before. And I love looking at jewelry. I love just like going to the V&A jewelry room and just being around jewelry. And, I follow loads of other jewelry designers, online and things like that. And I genuinely just really love it. So I think knowing more and more about jewelry and seeing more of it just kind of inspires me to think like, what can I make that I feel is different to what I've seen?
Yeah.
And like I genuinely, people that copy other people, like I can't get my head around that mindset, because if someone is doing something already, it like puts me off. I'm like, well, I don't want to do that because it's not exciting anymore.
Yeah.
So I think, the curiosity is for finding something new or different, I think. And that kind of keeps me inspired, I would say.
That's cool. I like that. I always find I'm the same when I see people already doing something. I'm like, I love that. How can I do something a bit different?
Yeah.
What I love about your work is I feel like it does have an identity, and it's probably something you've had to work on over the 5 years of you running the business. But at what point did you find that you actually really hooked into your identity as a designer? And is that something that came about while you were creating for other people? Like you're like, oh, I think this is what I'm gravitating towards. Or was it really when you're like, I want to make something for me. Now what is my identity going to be for this?
That's a really good question. Ooh,
I'm glad.
You're making me think. One of the things that I learned from working in the industry is when you design for different brands or different clients or whatever, and you're constantly having to change your handwriting. And I think it's really good to get into that practice of being able to kind of flex your aesthetic and like change it up. But I would say at the same time, I always had a certain vibe, I guess, that I felt like really comfortable designing within. And I think that was evident from like my first job. Like I was always given the more kind of like fun, playful kind of projects. I would always get them, which I just loved. And I think that kind of fun, playful element and like a bit kind of, I don't know, just kind of playful is probably one of the words I would use. Like things that are a bit not too kind of serious, I think.
Yeah.
That like I would always get given those briefs because that was always kind of naturally where my strengths were. So I think I always kind of had quite intuitively had like a handwriting, but I think when you're in a job where you're designing for multiple different brands, you kind of have to put that to one side because you don't get to design what you want to design. You have to design, you know, what will sell for that particular client.
Totally.
But it's been so rewarding to be able to just completely tune in to 100% what I want to make with no one else to say, oh no, don't, you know, oh, it has to be more like that. It has to be more like that. You know, I'll design stuff sometimes that I'm like, I know this isn't going to be particularly commercial, but I don't care. I just think it's so cool. I want to make it anyway.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, when you're running a business, at the end of the day, you do have to think about what will sell and you have to make that as well. But just being able to have that creative freedom to create what I want, like that is, to me, that's like the pinnacle. Like that to me is success. Like I don't necessarily chase after like the money or anything like that, but being able to have creative freedom to me is like the ultimate success.
Yeah. And I guess if we're going to talk about like the creative freedom and where you feel like you've had your success in your business, if you could turn back to Rosie of old, of 5 years ago, back in the day, what would you like share with that person that you feel would have been able to kickstart a couple of things a little bit earlier, that maybe if people are listening to this and they're interested in going into making their own jewellery or designs in general, like what things did you wish you knew earlier?
I think that's quite interesting because I think there's like two sides of it. So I think in one sense, it's like I actually think my naivety going into it all was like a real blessing because when I started the business, I was like 23 and I didn't know anything about business really, but I actually think that was a good thing because I think if I knew more, it might have been a bit more intimidating or it might have put me off. Whereas I kind of just thought, well, I just want to do it, so I'm going to do it. And I just did it. And then you sort of learn stuff as you go along and you know, you pick it up. But I think what I would say to myself would be just like, keep going. Like you're on the right track, just keep going. And there inevitably were points where I, you know, it was really hard and I wasn't necessarily feeling the benefits of it. And I felt like I was putting all this effort in and I wasn't going anywhere. And that was really frustrating, but there was just something in me that was like, just keep going, like just keep going. And eventually, like it really does pay off. And I know it's like so cliche, like that's just a massive cliche, but it is so true.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were times when I was just like, this isn't, you know, you would start to doubt, you know, you start to doubt yourself and you start to think maybe this isn't going to happen in the way I want it to. And, you know, you start to think like, how on earth am I ever going to sell enough jewelry to like pay my rent or my mortgage or like, you know what I mean? It just seems like unfeasible, but you can't you can have those thoughts, but you just can't let it stop you. Like you have to keep going, even though you're thinking, I don't know about this, if this is ever going to happen, but you just got to keep going. And that's the only way that there's any chance that it will. So, yeah.
It's interesting you talk about like, I remember when I was like 19 talking to other people when I was looking more into acting and presenting in that and talking to other actors and they're like, all I want to do is to be able to pay my rent with the money I make from the creative art I'm passionate about.
Yeah.
And
the dream.
It is the dream, right?
Yeah.
And you're kind of living that dream.
I'm living the dream now.
You're living the dream.
I am. Yeah.
When has been, I don't know if you've got a story or just a share, but like when has been one of the most difficult times within the last 10 months since November, where have you been sat on the floor like, is this actually happening, or have you felt pretty stable throughout?
Since going full time with Good Daze, I've felt great.
Yeah.
Last year, like balancing everything, there were definitely times where I was like, this is just too much. Like it just felt like it was just like I was saying to my boyfriend, like it felt like I'd got to the end of a marathon and I had to do a sprint. Like that's how it felt. Because I wasn't quite at the point where I could leave my job. But at the same time, it was like Christmas was approaching and I knew things were only going to get busier because Christmas is such a busy time for me. That's like where I get such a large percentage of my sales.
Oh, really?
There's so much riding on that. And it was like that, like incoming, you know, like craziness and chaoticness. And I was like, I know that I'm coming towards this. And I already felt sort of like pretty burnt out. And there were definitely times where I was like, I know I have to carry on, because I was like, I'm so close. Like, I know that I have to carry on, and I know that I will carry on, but like at what cost? Like, I was just like, am I going to get ill? Am I going to burn out? Like, yeah, there were points where I was like, oh, this is a lot. Like, this is a real test. But at the same time, I was so close. I was like, I have to do this, because I've been doing, you know, it was like 4.5 years in that I went full time, and I was, you know, I've been doing it for so long and putting so much into it. I was like, I can't give up now. So I just had to keep going. But yeah, I would say that was the hardest bit, was when the business was so busy and I was still working, and it was, yeah, that was a lot.
Yeah, full on.
Yeah, it was full on.
I know that, like, when I've spoken to other people who have done that same move, it really is just like at the point where you would think you're having the most success because you can finally consider going full time, is actually one of the most stressful points, because you're then technically doing 2 jobs.
Yes.
In one livelihood, like in one life.
Yeah,
exactly. That's
That's
too
the
much.
thing. It gets harder and harder and harder and harder, and then it gets a lot easier. But it's like, it just ramps up and ramps up and ramps up and ramps up, because yeah, as your business is growing, you're still the job is the same, but your business is growing. So it's like, yeah, it just kind of, and you're getting more and more tired, you know, more and more kind of like, the pressure is sort of mounting, and the business is growing, and and it kind of gets more and more and more intense. And then finally it, like, there's that point where it's just, I just honestly, like, the relief that I felt, because so the thing is that I always put 100% into my job as well. So I didn't want to let anything slide. Like, I put 100% into the business, and I put 100% into my job, and I would never do any less. So it was like, I was just giving all of myself to work. And I mean, that's not sustainable, really. Like, it is for a little bit while you've got to do it, but that's not a life, you know.
That's not a life.
It's not a life.
I find it fascinating how you moved into doing this full time, and that it was like a 5-year process, and kind of what I feel characteristics have really helped you do that, and like stuff that you've pushed through. I'm always curious though, like your actual process for creating now, because I know you said that you didn't enjoy a huge amount the making of it.
Yeah.
Every so often when you put stuff up on social media, I see that it's like it looks like it's CAD, or there's something going on where it's how you're creating. But like, what is the process for Good Days when making a jewelry design?
So I draw everything on this program called Rhinoceros, which is like 3D. It's basically like Illustrator, but 3-dimensional.
Okay.
So you've got like 4 screens, you can see it from all angles, and it's honestly like the best thing in the world. It's just the best. You can make anything on there. It's so cool. And anyone that asks me about it, I'm like, just learn it. Like, it's hard to learn, like it's really hard to learn, but it's so worth it. Yeah. So basically once I sort of have my ideas, which, you know, I get inspired by all sorts of various things, and I always think about my designs in terms of like, if I think of something and I'm like, I want to wear it, like I just want to wear it now, then I'm like, yeah, let's do it like that, let's make it happen. And then I draw it up on this program, and then the prototype gets 3D printed in wax and then cast in metal, and then it goes into the production process. So I work with a few workshops, like small workshops around London. So I've got like a casting workshop, plating workshop. I mean, they're not my workshops, just to make that clear.
The people you connect with,
so everything in terms of the making is outsourced, but this program basically enables me to have 100% control over the design of the piece without having to actually make it.
Physically make it,
because I even if I could, I haven't sort of honed those skills, but even if I could do the making process, I just don't think I could repeatedly make the same piece. I just don't. I think that I would find that really hard to do. Like it, you know, I would just stop putting the effort in, and it would just become rubbish. I know myself well enough to know that I shouldn't make them myself.
Yeah, and when you built those relationships with the companies within London, like how did that come about? Did you just approach them? Like, did you Google like casters in London and then you just called every single one and was like, hey, I want to do this? Or how did that even come about?
So at uni, I did a jewellery design course, and at uni, it's sort of, you know, you would learn about the various different casters and stuff, you know, you sort of be aware of them.
Okay.
And then you try a few, you know, some would be good, some would not be so good. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of is something that, you know, you just try a few places and see what works. Like with the 3D printing, the company that prints the pieces for me, that was very much a case of like, I didn't have any contacts. So I basically just had to do the researching, approach them, you know, get quotes for different things, try them out, see the quality. Like it was a process of trying to find the best option.
Yeah.
And like with my polisher, it's like a woman who I know through the industry. You know, I did a pop-up with her a few years ago, and she started a polishing business, and I thought, great. So, you know, and then
ideal.
Exactly. And then some of my friends, like one of my friends is like a stone setter, so I, you know, use her sometimes. Another one of my friends does like freelance polishing alongside studying. So it's kind of just, you know, you get these connections and you get a sense of what places are good to go with, which places aren't so good, and you kind of just try them out yourself. Like I often get people asking me, you know, sliding into my DMs and saying like, what casters do you use and stuff. And I'm really like keen that people should try things out for themselves, because like I use a casters that, you know, some of my friends don't use for various reasons. They use a casters that I don't use for various reasons. Like you have to kind of figure out what works for you. And I think it's only something you can do yourself, really.
Totally. And what I love about what you're saying there is like a lot of these people have either become friends or you've had friends and then you brought them into your business in certain ways. And that's what I love about, like, every time I go on your page and the way you speak to camera on Instagram, let's say, like, I feel like you are constantly trying to build a community in some way, like a creative business side of one, like you're saying there, where you bring people into what you do, but also like the community that follows you and actually buys your jewellery. And I think the epitome of that was when I went to see you in Camden, and you had so many people there for your pop-up, like a solo project as a pop-up. So I'm curious, like, what does community mean to you? And how have you built it? And is it all through social media?
So definitely Instagram definitely has a big part to play. I think one of the things that, so all of the business owners that I know that are really successful, one of the things they have in common is that they really appreciate their customers or their audience, and they really see them as people, like real people, like not just as an analytic or whatever. And I think, like, honestly, I've met so many lovely people through having my brand, and everyone that supports me or buys a piece from me, like, they are allowing me to live my dream. Like, I'm genuinely so grateful. And I just think it's so important to express that. And, you know, the pop-up that you came to, I was honestly like so blown away by the amount of people that showed up. And it's like, how can you not want to talk to and get to know people that are supporting what you do? Like, I wouldn't have it any other way. And these people are like, I feel like they're like my friends, because, you know, we all have something in common, and my customers are just all people that I would be friends with. Like, I haven't met one that I haven't liked.
They're all good eggs.
They're they're just such nice people, and they're so supportive. And I'm like, I don't know how I've got so lucky that these people who were formerly strangers are just so nice about what I do and are so supportive. And there's just so much joy in that, and being able to be surrounded by that energy and be surrounded, you know, I work with a lot of my friends as well, like with pop-ups and stuff like that. Why would you not want to be around and be supported by and work with people that you get on with and that you like? And so it just feels very, very natural. And I think the more that I try and form those connections with people, the more I enjoy it. So it just, it's a no-brainer. basically.
And definitely something I pick up from what you were saying there, and something I kind of observed from just watching you over the last couple of months, not in a weird way. I'm not watching you like just observing how you operate. Like, I feel like you don't take each connection for granted, kind of like we were saying with the analytics, like actually spending that time with someone and speaking to them, especially if they've actually physically come to an event you had. When I first approached you at the event and you were chatting to that other person, I genuinely thought you guys knew each other, like you were mates. And then when she was like, oh, bye, I was there like, wait, hold on. So I think that, yeah, I really like what you said there around like don't see stuff as analytics. Like these are people, especially in an environment where you're selling things that are of proper value.
Yeah.
You don't take that for granted.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, anyone that buys and wears my jewelry, like I feel not indebted to them, but like I feel like they deserve my time at the least. You know what I mean? They deserve a conversation, and I want to get to know them, because it just makes everything make a lot more sense. You know, when you know who is appreciating your stuff and who is buying it and who is wearing it, everything just kind of falls into place. And when I'm designing or when I'm doing my branding, or, you know, I'm thinking about the real people that are my customer. I'm not thinking about this concept of like, who's my customer? What do they want? I'm like, what does that person want? What does that person want? Oh, that person said, you know, they'd really want a bangle. I'll make a bangle. Like, you know, it's like a symbiotic relationship of like, they're getting something out of it because they like my jewelry, but I'm also getting something out of it because I'm feeling creatively fulfilled, and it's just a joy, you know? So I think it just kind of, I think as well, it's such a strength of small businesses, because we have the privilege that we can do that. Whereas, you know, big businesses, they don't even have that option because it's just a completely different setup. Yeah. Whereas when you are a small business, you can talk to your customers, you can meet them and talk to them. And that is just something that you can't do as a big business. So it's just something that I think is, it's just really important, and it's something that I really appreciate being able to do.
If you were to start again, like, how did you get your first client? Was it all friends and family and like built out, but like to the point now where you can do a pop-up and you have all of these people show up? Like, where did it begin for you? Was it just heavily focusing on friends and family first and then building out? Or did you kind of naturally start creating and just hope that people would find your work? Like, what was that business-wise that you started with?
So it took a lot of time. Like, I think that is what I would say. And I think one of the things when you start a business, like, you have this kind of like slightly arrogant feeling that you're going to like open shop and the world is going to be like, thank you, this is what we have been waiting for.
You have arrived.
And you're going to be like inundated with orders straight off the bat. And that is just not the reality. Unless, I mean, obviously it's a different story if you have like a massive marketing budget or something. But, you know, if you're in a situation like I was, where I was just funding it with my, you know, 9-to-5 job, it was very small scale at the beginning. And I was just getting like one order, you know, I was getting few and far between orders. I would text my mum every time I got an order, like, oh my God, mum, I got an order. That's how infrequent they were, that she wasn't getting too annoyed at me. And yeah, it was, you know, there were a few friends, a few people that would sort of just stumble across it on Instagram, I suppose. And it was just a really slow growth. Like, I would, you know, I'd be selling basically nothing. But I mean, it was fine because I had a job and I was making very small quantities. So it was sort of just, I just accepted that I was in it for the long haul. Like, it was going to be the long game, and I was just having to accept that it would take time to find my people. And as soon as I started to, you know, it started to get out there more, and my following started to grow just by sort of posting on Instagram and just, you know, doing markets, doing pop-ups, doing whatever I could really just to get myself out there. It slowly built up, and I can't emphasize that enough. It was slow. Like, it was, you know, it took 4.5 years. I would say over lockdown, that was when it felt like I finally could see that it was a possibility that I could do it full time. I would say before lockdown, it just felt like a distant dream.
Yeah.
But I sort of had this belief that, you know, I was very early on in my career. I was like, I've got a lot of time. I'm okay to like commit myself to the long game. Like you know, even if it takes 10 years for it to get to a point where I can, you know, it can pay my rent, I'm okay with that. Like it will be worth it. And I honestly never thought I'd be able to do it full time. I just assumed I would always have to do freelance or something on
There'd
the
be
side.
something else going on.
Yeah, like I honestly didn't think it would ever get to the point where I could do it full time. But I kind of was just like, you know what? I'm in it for the long haul, and however much time it takes, I will get there in the end. Even if I'm getting one new customer a month, like eventually we will get there. And luckily, you know, it did snowball over lockdown. It was a real catalyst. People were on Instagram. I did like the Selfridges pop up, which was really amazing. There were like a few things that happened that just sort of like blew it up a little bit, and then it got to the point where now it's a lot more consistent. But prior to that, I mean, it was tumbleweed, like, unless, you know, a lot of the time it was tumbleweed, but that was sort of all part of the process really, and I sort of just accepted that.
I'm curious, and you don't have to talk about it if you don't want, but if we could talk like numbers, when you started, do you know how many pieces of jewelry you sold like in your first year, and where that's gone to now? Like
I would say at the beginning, I was maybe selling like one a week.
Right.
One every 2 weeks. Like
that's still pretty good.
2017.
Yeah.
Also bear in mind, I priced myself like horribly. It was so cheap, and I was making, you know, no money. Like as in, my margins were rubbish just because I didn't really have a full grasp on what they should have been. Now, like I think November and December last year, it's like I would sell like hundreds of pieces, maybe like 200 pieces, staggeringly more than at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like numbers that I wouldn't even have dreamt of at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I will say, just to be realistic, like 2022 hasn't been as booming as 2020 and as 2021.
Yeah.
So just to be realistic, because like the consumer climate is trickier now, and people aren't buying as many like not essential things as during, I think in lockdown, everyone had a lot of disposable income, and that was definitely a factor. So I do want to be realistic and say that I'm like, things aren't as booming as they were in 2020, 2021. But again, like I'm in it for the long haul. It's okay. Like it's like I know it's not personal, and as long as I can pay my wage, I'm not going anywhere. Like I'm not going to stop just because the consumer climate is poorer. Like I'm going to keep going, and I have full faith that it will come back around again.
Yeah.
You have to, don't you?
Definitely. I think like after the growth you've had, like you can see that there is a tangible change.
Yeah.
And that it will, as you said, like keep growing.
Yeah.
But it's more like, rather than what's this year versus next year, now it's more like what's this last 2 years versus the next 5.
Exactly.
And that's kind of, it's cool that you've got into that next stage, that next headspace, which is rather than how am I going to pay this month's rent and how am I going to do this year versus last, it's now like, okay, what's the next 3 years look like?
Yeah. Which I acknowledge that there's like an incredible privilege that comes with that, because like I have been able to save money, and I do have like, you know, a financial security blanket. You know, my parents, if push came to shove, my parents would support me. Like, you know, my boyfriend earns a good wage. Like, I know that it's a lot harder for people that don't have those safety nets, but I think I would say, like, if you're going to leave your job to go full time, save a chunk of money, because that's what I did, and that just gives some sort of peace of mind. Because last year I had no inkling that this year would be less lucrative. Like, I thought, oh, you know, coming out of lockdown, everyone's going to be spending, happy days. But actually, you don't know what's going to happen in the next few months, like financially. You never do with a business. And there's this like assumption that it's growth, when in fact it's not. Like, it's up and down and up and down. And I think if you can give yourself some sort of financial safety net so that you're not constantly feeling the pressure of that. And, you know, if you are feeling the pressure of that, I just think it really like stilts your creativity, and it's also just really stressful. So yeah, I would recommend anyone that's going to leave their job to go full-time biz, I would say save some money.
Get that chunk set aside.
Get that chunk. Yeah.
I know a lot of other places talk about like 3 to 6 months worth of your wage set aside, and it can take a long time to get to that. But it just means that when you do take that jump,
it's not scary.
You're not going, if it doesn't work this month, I will it's not going to go well.
Exactly. Because that's not a way, that's just not a way to live. That's not, that's just scary. It's scary anyway, you know, not knowing when, you know, how much money you're going to make in any month. But knowing that you had to sell that many things in order to even pay your bills, you don't want to have that pressure. So do anything you can to not be in that position. I would, if I had to, I would take on freelance work or whatever. I think it's important to do what you have to do so that you don't feel the stress of that if you can. And yeah, I think that's really important. And I think people don't talk about that enough, because there's this assumption that, you know, you see someone doing their business full time, and obviously, you know, you don't know their financial situation. They might be living with their parents. They might be supported by a partner. They might, you know, have loads of inheritance in the bank. You never know someone's situation. I think it's the more we can talk about that kind of stuff, the better, because it's, you know, it's an acknowledgement that it can be really hard at times, and anything you can do to lessen that stress is really important.
Rosie, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been really good fun.
Oh, I'm glad. If people wanted to find you and check out any of your work, where can they find you online?
So the website is gooddazeahead.com. Daze is spelled D-A-Z-E. And the Instagram is @GoodDazesJewellery.
Sweet. Thank you everyone so much for listening, and I hope to see you at the next episode.